Welcome back to Sip and Talk, everyone. I'm ready to get into probably the most loaded word in politics today.
And I'm right here with you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be tuning in from. Yeah, today we're tackling a word that gets thrown around maybe a bit too much these days. Dictator.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere, isn't it? It's become this go-to insult for any leader we don't like, or maybe if they pass a law that feels a bit too tight, it's kind of losing its punch.
That's exactly the issue. But, when you actually look at the political psychology behind it, there's this really fascinating paradox. Real dictators, the ones, running regimes built on actual terror and total control, they are absolutely terrified of that label.
Right. They'll shut down newspapers, jail people, just to stop anyone from saying it.
Precisely. But then you call a democratic leader a dictator, maybe in an opinion piece or something. What happens?
Well, they might get ticked off, maybe fire back a statement. But ultimately, they kind of just have to shrug it off, right? They might even say something like, hey, the fact you can stand here and call me that on TV kind of proves the system's working, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that difference in reaction, that tells you everything. You see, in a democracy, the leader's power is, well, it's borrowed. It's temporary.
Yeah, it comes with an expiration date.
Yeah.
Term limits, elections, all that. They're basically like an employee of the state, in a way.
That's a good way to put it. It's a job description. But for a real autocrat, the power isn't borrowed. It feels intrinsic to them. It's fused with who they are, their whole self-worth, their place in history.
So when you call them a dictator,
you're not just criticizing a policy they enacted last week. No. You're essentially saying their entire claim to rule, their whole I'm the indispensable genius holding this country together narrative. It's all a lie, a fraud built on force.
Wow. So it's not just political disagreement. It's like you're questioning their entire reason for being, their right to even exist in that position. That's deep.
It's the deepest possible insult, existentially speaking. So, okay, that's our mission today. We want to cut through all the, the shouting and the slogans. We're going to really unpack what a dictator actually is, according to political science.
Right. And why does that label pack such a punch? What do these autocrats really worry about when the lights go out? And maybe most importantly, give you, our listeners, a kind of clear, objective checklist, a way to assess leaders around the world for yourselves.
We want to equip you with the facts. So here's a little assignment for you, Sip and Talkers. As we go through the criteria, we're going to discuss these core features, these actionable standards. Think about your own leaders, your own government. How do they stack up?
Yeah, we're not here to point fingers or tell you who's who. We're just providing the tools, the framework, so you can make your own informed judgment. It's time to move past the sound bites.
So grab your coffee or whatever you're sipping on. Let's really get into the nuts and bolts of how absolute power actually works and why it makes rulers so incredibly sensitive.
Okay, so let's start with that core difference we just touched on, the actual source and nature of power, because that really dictates everything, especially how leaders react to, well, people talking smack about them.
Right. If we do, a rational breakdown for a democratic leader, where does the power come from? It's institutions, right? Yeah. The Constitution, courts, legislature, and crucially, the people's consent. The vote.
Exactly. Popular consent, validated regularly. So if you, as a citizen, stand up and say, I think the president is handling the economy terribly, what happens?
Well, it's just politics. It's Tuesday. The leader knows that's part of the deal. They signed up for scrutiny. They've got term limits staring them down. Another election coming up. It's expected.
And interestingly, their ability to withstand that criticism actually strengthens the system. When a Democratic leader gets protested massively or faces really harsh attacks from the opposition and the system doesn't collapse, that sends a message. What message? That the rules are stronger than the ruler.
Precisely. The institutions hold. It's like that quote, if you can mock me, it means the system still works. The system itself is robust.
Okay, now let's flip that completely. The dictator. Where's their power coming from? Not consent, obviously.
Not genuine consent, no. It's derived almost entirely from fear and control. Their claim to legitimacy isn't based on votes. It's built on a carefully constructed myth.
The myth being?
I am the special one, the genius. The only one who can protect you from chaos, from enemies outside, maybe enemies inside. Without me, everything falls apart. It's a narrative of indispensability.
So if I, as a citizen in that system, dare to criticize.
You're not just disagreeing with a policy, you're launching a direct assault on the very foundation of their rule. You're trying to poke holes in that myth, burst the illusion they've spent years, maybe decades building.
It's not dissent, it's demolition.
It's perceived as an attack designed to bring the whole thing down, and that leads to the difference in threat level. It's just night and day.
In a democracy, if you criticize the leader, the worst that usually happens is, they lose the next election. Maybe they get impeached or have to resign. It's procedural. You might get yelled at online, but you're probably safe.
Right. But in a dictatorship, criticism isn't just commentary. It's immediately seen as sedition, as treason. That phrase, he is a dictator, isn't heard as an observation. To the ruler and their inner circle, it sounds like a call to arms.
Like someone shouting, let's get him.
Exactly. He must be pulled down now. Because the system itself, being fused with the leader, cannot tolerate that kind of existential challenge. There's no mechanism for legitimate opposition.
Wait, hang on. If the power rests entirely on this, bubble of infallibility, doesn't that put insane pressure on the leader personally? Are they just constantly worried about keeping up appearances?
No, absolutely, 100%. And that leads directly to what some call the power narcissism structure. It's this complete fusion of the leader's ego with the state itself.
So they genuinely believe, I am the state.
Often, yes. Or at least they act like it. Any challenge to their personal judgment, their wisdom, their genius, isn't just seen as disagreeing with them. It's framed as an attack on the entire nation, on the people themselves.
That's terrifying, because it means the entire population is basically held hostage by the leader's incredibly fragile ego.
That's a perfect way to put it. Hostages to a glass heart. When someone dares to criticize, the dictator screams, "You're insulting the people. You're betraying the nation." But really, the people are just props in the psychodrama of the leader's own insecurity.
The insult feels personal, but the crackdown is brutally institutional.
Exactly. The state apparatus, the police, the courts, the spies becomes the shield for that fragile ego.
Okay, let's try our analogy thing. I like these. A democratic leader getting criticized. It's like the CEO of a company getting complaints from shareholders. The CEO thinks.
Okay, complaints noted. Performance review is next quarter. Maybe I need to adjust strategy. Maybe they'll vote me out. It's part of the job.
Right. Annoying, maybe, but expected. Now, a dictator getting criticized.
That's like a master con artist living large under a fake identity, suddenly having someone stand up in the middle of a party and shred their fake passport in front of everyone.
Whoa. Okay. The reaction isn't going to be polite disagreement.
No way. The internal monologue isn't, let's debate this. It's, you're destroying my entire life, my safety, my fortune. Do you have a death wish? The stakes are utterly different.
Existential. So democracy runs on, what did you call it? Trust renewal. Like constantly having to earn back the public's trust through elections and performance.
Yes. While a dictatorship runs entirely on fear renewal, the constant visible threat of what happens if you step out of line, the disappearances, the public punishments, the surveillance, that fear needs to be constantly reinforced.
So calling the dictator a dictator, it's like yelling out the truth that everyone secretly knows but is too afraid to say, hey everyone, this whole strongman act, it's built on nothing but fear. The emperor has no clothes.
Precisely, and that's the core vulnerability. The illusion of absolute strength is, paradoxically, the source of their greatest fragility. They have to crush the truth because they know, deep down, the truth is lethal to their power.
Okay, we've totally nailed the psychology, I think, why the word stings so much. But now we need to get practical. Let's move from the why to the what. What does dictator actually mean in objective terms? We need to cut through the casual insults and get grounded.
Absolutely. And to do that properly, we actually have to go way back to the origin of the term. In the Roman Republic. It's crucial to remember it wasn't always a bad word.
Right. I remember reading about this. It was like a specific job title, wasn't it, for emergencies?
Exactly. A temporary, legally appointed supreme authority. The Senate could appoint a dictator, but usually only for a specific crisis, like a major war that needed swift, unified command. And critically, it was time-limited. Yeah. Typically a maximum of 6 months. The idea was they'd solve the crisis, wield extraordinary power for that short period, and then this is key hand the power back to the regular constitutional bodies, the Senate and the consuls.
So it was designed as a safety valve, not a permanent state.
Precisely. Think of figures like Cincinnatus, famously called from his farm, given dictatorial power, won the war, and immediately resigned to go back to farming. That was the ideal. Or even someone like Lucius Cornelius Cinna, who held the office but within its intended framework.
But then things went south, right? Someone broke the rules.
Yeah. Figures like Sulla in the late Republic really abused the office. He refused to step down, used his dictatorial powers to purge political enemies, basically rewriting the rules to maintain his grip. He showed how that temporary emergency power could be twisted into personal tyranny.
So Sulla was the guy who kind of ruined it for everyone. He tasted that absolute power and decided, nah, I'm keeping this.
That's a fair summary. His actions seriously undermined the Republican Constitution and paved the way for the Caesars and the eventual rise of the empire. That's the historical pivot point.
Okay, so that ancient Roman definition is clearly not what we mean today when we call someone a dictator.
Not at all. The modern definition used by political scientists is much darker. It refers to one person or sometimes a very small, unelected group, like a military junta or a party politburo, holding absolute, unchecked political power.
And how is that power maintained?
Not through laws or legitimate consent, but through force, through terror, through systematic suppression of basic freedoms, and usually wall-to-wall propaganda.
Right. So to help people cut through the noise, especially online where everyone calls everyone a dictator, we need a clear checklist. What are the actual objective features of a true dictatorship?
Okay, let's lay out the 6 core features. This is the political science toolkit. Think of it as a diagnostic test.
Feature number 1.
Source of power. Critically, a dictator's power does not come from free and fair elections. If elections happen at all, they're a sham.
What does sham mean in this context?
It means total state control of media, so no opposing views get heard. It means the main opposition leaders might be in jail or forced into exile. It means ballot boxes get stuffed, counts get faked, and the result is predetermined. The election is just theater to pretend there's legitimacy.
Okay, feature 2.
Power concentration. This is fundamental. One person or that tiny clique controls everything. Legislative power, making laws, executive power, enforcing laws, judicial power, interpreting laws, and military power. All branches report to the top.
So no checks and balances, like the Supreme Court can't overrule the leader.
Exactly. The courts become rubber stamps. If the highest court in the land wouldn't dare rule against the leader's wishes, or if they did, the ruling would just be ignored, then you don't have separation of powers. You have concentrated dictatorial power.
Makes sense. Feature 3.
Term limits, or rather, the lack thereof. Dictators aim for unlimited tenure, lifetime rule.
How do they achieve that if the country has term limits written down somewhere?
They change the rules. Suddenly, there's a referendum or a constitutional amendment pushed through the rubber stamp legislature specifically designed to allow the current leader to stay in power indefinitely. It's all about personalizing the rules for their own survival.
Okay, number 4.
Freedom suppression. This has to be systematic. We're talking about pervasive repression of anyone who disagrees. Media is either directly owned by the state or so heavily intimidated that they practice self-censorship.
What about political opposition?
Opposition parties are often banned outright, or sometimes they're allowed to exist as tiny, powerless shells just to maintain the facade of a multi-party system, but they have no real chance of ever gaining power or even influencing policy.
Feature 5.
Succession mechanism. How does power change hands? Not through votes. It's usually one of 3 ways. A family dynasty, like passing power from father to son.
Like North Korea.
Exactly. Or the incumbent dictator handpicks their successor, often someone loyal but maybe not too threatening. Or third, power changes through violence, a military coup, an internal power struggle. The transfer isn't peaceful or predictable based on rules.
And the last one, number 6.
Violence and surveillance. This is crucial. In a dictatorship, things like secret police, people disappearing, torture, and mass surveillance aren't just occasional abuses. They are routine, institutionalized tools the state uses to maintain control and crush dissent.
Like the modern digital Leninism you mentioned.
Yeah.
Using tech for total control.
Precisely. AI, facial recognition, vast camera networks, internet blackouts, social credit scores, using technology to make state control more pervasive and inescapable than ever before.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty clear and frankly scary checklist. When you apply that to historical figures, Stalin, Hitler, the Kims, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, they tick every single box, don't they?
They do, and the results were catastrophic human rights disasters on an unimaginable scale. The framework holds up.
But here's the rub, right? The problem of, What did the outline call it? Semantic inflation.
Yeah, the overuse of the word. Because nowadays, people slap the dictator label on almost any leader enacting a policy they find restrictive.
Like during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Leaders imposing lockdowns were called dictators, or leaders with tough immigration policies.
Exactly. And it completely ignores the fundamental difference between a temporary, democratically debated emergency measure, which can be challenged in court and reversed by the next election, and permanent, systemic, unchecked oppression where challenge is impossible and met with violence.
And it often breaks down along ideological lines, too.
Absolutely. The left might be quick to call right-wing strongmen like, say, Duterte or Orban dictators. The right might have pointed to leaders like Chavez or Maduro early on. It becomes a political weapon used to demonize opponents rather than accurately describe a system of government.
So how do we differentiate? Let's take that example, Maduro in Venezuela versus Orban in Hungary. How do they compare against the checklist?
Well, based on most political science analysis, Maduro fits the criteria much more closely. You have documented, widespread election fraud, a judiciary completely co-opted by the executive, political opponents exiled or jailed, media largely suppressed, and the state using force to maintain power amidst economic collapse. It functions like an autocracy.
And Orban?
Orban's situation is often described differently, perhaps as competitive authoritarianism or illiberal democracy. Yes, there are serious concerns about democratic backsliding, pressure on the media, and weakening of checks and balances, but opposition parties do still compete in elections, sometimes win significant victories, like in local government. There are still some institutional constraints, even if they're under attack. It's a system being degraded, arguably, but perhaps not yet fully consolidated into a personal dictatorship where all checks are gone. The difference is crucial, even if both trends are worrying.
So it's a spectrum, not just a binary switch.
Exactly. And social media just pours gasoline on this fire. Nuance gets zero traction. A careful analysis explaining the difference between Orban and Maduro gets maybe 1,000 views.
But a tweet screaming Orban is a dictator gets 100,000 likes.
Right. And the danger is this constant hyperbole dilutes the meaning of the word. When everyone is called a dictator, it makes the actual dictators, the Assads using chemical weapons, the Kim Jong-uns running gulags, seem somehow less uniquely horrific. It normalizes the extreme.
Okay, so people need practical tools. Forget the shouting online. Let's give them 5 concrete, actionable things they can check for themselves when evaluating a leader or a regime.
Good idea. Standard number 1. Check independent election reports. Don't rely on state media or government claims. Look for assessments from credible, nonpartisan international observers. Groups like the OSCE in Europe or the Carter Center globally. Did they say the last election was genuinely free and fair? That's a critical data point.
Number 2.
Look for a history of constitutional changes, specifically designed to extend the current leader's term. If the rules of the game are constantly being rewritten solely to keep one person in power, indefinitely think Lukashenko in Belarus, who's been doing this since 1994, that's a huge red flag. It shows the personalization of power over institutional rules.
Third standard.
Consult the Media Freedom Index. Reporters Without Borders publishes this annually. Where does the country rank? A consistently low ranking isn't just about a few biased outlets. It indicates systematic, state-level efforts to control information and silence critical voices, essential for dictatorial control.
Number 4.
Check the political prisoner count. Use reports from reputable human rights organizations like Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch. Is there a documented pattern of the state arresting and imprisoning people primarily for their political views or opposition activities?
Yeah.
Jailing rivals is a classic dictator move.
And the 5th standard.
Look at the history of peaceful power transfer. In the last, say, 30 years, has there been at least one instance where the ruling party or leader lost a contested election and peacefully handed over power to the winner? If the answer is no, if power has only ever changed hands through death, coups, or within the same ruling elite, you're almost certainly looking at an entrenched authoritarian system, not a functioning democracy.
Okay, we've got the definition down. We know why it's such a charged term, and we have a checklist. Now let's get into the real nitty-gritty, the mechanics. How does a dictator actually get power? And more importantly, how do they keep it? Turns out it's maybe less about controlling millions of people.
And much, much more about controlling a very small, very specific group of people. But first, we need to understand the absolute fundamental driver of pretty much all politics everywhere throughout history.
So don't leave me hanging.
Political survival. Pure and simple. Whether you're a democratically elected president or a ruthless autocrat, Your primary goals are almost always the same three things. 1, gain power. 2, maintain power. 3, control the money that allows you to maintain power.
So things like ideology or actually governing well, those are secondary.
Often, yes. They can be tools to help achieve survival, but survival itself is the prime directive. And let's be clear, historically speaking, democracy is the exception. Dictatorship in various forms has been the default mode of human political organization for most of history. It's common because, in some ways, it's simpler if you can pull it off.
But no one rules alone. And even the scariest tyrant needs helpers.
Absolutely. Nobody rules alone. You always need supporters. But who you need to support you differs dramatically between systems. This brings us to the concept of the winning coalition.
Okay, break down this winning coalition idea. Sounds important.
It's crucial. Imagine a pyramid of political influence. At the very bottom, the massive base, you have the general population, all the citizens. In most systems, especially dictatorships, they have the least direct influence on who rules and what policies are chosen. They're kind of interchangeable. They only really matter if they rise up in massive numbers, which is rare and hard to organize.
So the masses are cannon fodder.
Politically speaking, often yes. Now, move up a level. The middle layer is the actual selectors, often just called the selectorate S. This is the pool of people who actually have some influence in choosing the leader.
Who's in this group?
In a large democracy, S is huge. It's basically all eligible voters, plus maybe party insiders, influential media figures. In a dictatorship, S is much, much smaller. Maybe it's the top few hundred military officers, the richest oligarchs, key regional governors, senior members of the ruling party. It's the group from which the real support base is drawn.
Okay, so S is the pool. What's at the very top of the pyramid?
That's the crucial group, the winning coalition, Q. These are the absolutely essential people whose support the leader must have to stay in power. If this group abandons the leader, they fall instantly.
How big is Q?
This is the key insight, and it's often deeply cynical. In a democracy, Q is enormous. To win and keep power, a democratic leader needs to keep millions of voters happy, or at least happy enough. They need broad support across different groups. Media needs to be somewhat manageable. The opposition needs to be contended with. Q is vast.
In a dictatorship.
Q is tiny, really tiny. It might be just a dozen people, maybe 50 at most. Think the head of the secret police, the general commanding the presidential guard, the minister controlling oil revenues, maybe a couple of key family members or cronies who control major industries.
Wait, just 50 people? You're saying a dictator ruling over millions only needs to keep 50 guys happy?
Pretty much, yes. Because those 50 people control the instruments of coercion, the guns, and the critical flows of money. The smaller Q is, the easier and cheaper it is to buy their loyalty with private rewards, often stolen directly from the state treasury or resources.
That is incredibly counterintuitive. You'd think they'd care about the 50 million citizens.
They care about the 50 million only to the extent that they remain productive enough to be taxed or exploited and quiet enough not to cause trouble. But their day-to-day survival depends entirely on keeping that tiny Q loyal and happy. If Q defects, the dictator is finished, probably violently. The 50 million are background noise. The 50 in Q are the kingmakers and kingbreakers.
Okay, so focusing on Q is survival. How does someone become a dictator in the first place? How do they seize power?
It usually follows a ruthless three-step process. Step 1, eliminate the incumbent leader or destroy the existing government structure. Get rid of the person currently in charge. Could be waiting for them to die naturally. Could be a coup. Or, very commonly, it involves buying off the incumbent's own winning coalition.
Buying them off. How does that work?
If the current ruler is weak, maybe the economy is collapsing, and they're running out of money or resources to keep their own Q happy, that's when they're vulnerable. An ambitious rival, maybe a general or another strongman, can approach the incumbent's Q and offer them a better deal, more money, more power, guaranteed safety if they switch allegiance.
So coups are often just bidding wars for the loyalty of a few key people.
In essence, yes. Especially military coups, which are the most common way dictators are overthrown. It's often about a rival promising the generals a bigger slice of the pie. Look at the Pinochet coup in Chile in '73. Allende was the democratically elected leader, but the economy was in free fall, hyperinflation, chaos.
Right.
The military Allende's effective coup in that critical moment saw their status and resources threatened by the instability. Pinochet, another general, essentially offered them stability and a return to prominence. They switched sides. It wasn't really about ideology for many in the military. It was about their institutional survival and benefit, which Allende could no longer guarantee.
Okay, so step 1, eliminate the old boss. often by flipping their queue. Step 2.
Control the government apparatus. Immediately seize control of the key levers of state power, the ministries, the central bank, the state television and radio stations, the military command centers. You need to control the infrastructure of rule.
And step 3.
Establish a new winning coalition queue that is personally loyal to you, the new leader, and make sure they understand immediately that loyalty will be richly rewarded. You have to consolidate your own base of essential supporters right away.
Okay, so you're in power, you've got your new queue, now the real work starts. Staying there. This leads to survival rule number 1.
Yes, the purge and the principle of reverse selection. This is absolutely critical for long-term dictatorial survival.
Why purge? Don't you need your loyalists?
You need loyalty, but loyalty is fickle, especially when based on bribes. You have to constantly distribute resources, cash, contracts, powerful jobs to your queue to prevent them from being bought off by the next ambitious rival who comes along. Think about places like Nigeria. Historically, with constant coups, it was often rival generals outbidding each other for the loyalty of key military units.
So you pay your queue well, but why purge them? Especially the ones who helped you get power.
Because the people who helped you rise are the most dangerous. They know how the game is played. They know your weaknesses. They know how to overthrow a regime because they just did it with you. They are ambitious, capable, and they might think, hey, why shouldn't I be the one at the top?
So your closest allies become your biggest threats.
Immediately. A smart dictator moves quickly to sideline or eliminate the initial group that brought them to power. Think of Stalin's Great Purge. He systematically eliminated most of the old Bolsheviks, the heroes of the revolution, the very people who put the communist regime in place. Why? To shrink his queue and replace capable, independent-minded revolutionaries with apparatchiks whose loyalty was based purely on personal benefit derived directly from Stalin himself.
And this ties into reverse selection. What's that?
It's the counterintuitive idea that competence is actually dangerous in your inner circle. You don't want brilliant, capable, ambitious people in your queue because they might challenge you.
You pick loyal idiots.
Not necessarily idiots, but you prioritize absolute loyalty above all other traits, including competence. You surround yourself with trusted friends, family members, people who owe their entire position and wealth solely to you. They might be mediocre administrators or generals, but they are beholden. Ambitious, competent supporters get purged because they represent a potential future rival.
So the result is often a government run by less than stellar people, prone to inefficiency and corruption.
Exactly. But that inefficiency and corruption isn't necessarily seen as a failure by the dictator. It's a calculated feature of the system designed to ensure their personal survival by eliminating potential internal threats. It's unbelievably cynical, but from a pure power retention perspective, it makes a grim kind of sense. Okay, so survival hinges on controlling that tiny winning coalition, Q. And controlling Q is fundamentally an economic proposition. This brings us squarely to the economics of dictatorship. It's basically crony capitalism fueled by wealth extraction.
Wealth extraction. That sounds clinical. What does it mean in practice? Like that phrase from the outline, cutting the leaks.
Yeah, it's a stark metaphor. The idea is to extract as much wealth as possible from the general population in the leaks through taxes, control of resources, state monopolies, whatever. But you can't cut them so short that they die.
Because dead leaks don't produce more wealth.
Exactly. So you need to keep the population just productive enough, just healthy enough to continue generating resources that the state, meaning the dictator and their queue, can skim off the top. Maximize extraction while ensuring minimal subsistence for the producers.
And what about people who manage to get rich independently in this system? Is that allowed?
It's incredibly dangerous to be rich in a dictatorship unless your wealth comes directly from and is conditional upon the regime's favor. If you build an independent fortune, you become a potential threat, you might fund opposition, or build your own power base.
So if your loyalty is questioned,
your wealth is the first thing to go. Assets frozen, businesses confiscated, maybe you end up in jail on trumped-up charges. This constant threat keeps even the wealthy elites scared, dependent, and hopefully loyal. Independent wealth is a risk the dictator cannot tolerate.
Which is why crony capitalism is so central.
It's the engine. Dictators seize control of the most lucrative parts of the economy: oil, diamonds, minerals, telecommunications, banking, often through nationalization. Then they grant exclusive rights, licenses, and contracts to members of their queue, their family, and loyal cronies.
So these oligarchs owe their entire fortune to the dictator's personal favor.
100%. They get incredibly rich, but they have no independent power base. Their wealth exists only as long as they remain in the dictator's good graces. It creates a powerful incentive for loyalty.
And if you're an entrepreneur who doesn't play the game, or maybe even speaks out,
economic repression comes swiftly. Suddenly, you're facing a crippling tax audit. Your import licenses are mysteriously revoked. Your assets get frozen pending some vague investigation. The state's bureaucratic tools are weaponized to crush anyone who steps out of line economically or politically. It's all done under the color of law, but the intent is purely political destruction.
Okay, this all feeds into these 5 laws of allocation, the dictator's handbook for distributing the spoils, right?
Exactly. These are the cold, hard rules for managing resources to maximize your chances of staying in power. And the number one principle is always, always prioritize the people who keep you safe, your winning coalition, Q.
But it's a balancing act, you said. You have to pay Q enough, but not too much.
It's the trickiest tightrope walk imaginable. You need to pay your key supporters just enough so that they remain loyal, meaning you have to offer them more than any potential rival could credibly promise them if they defected.
Okay, keep them happy.
The UT. You must not pay them so much that they become independently powerful. If your top general controls vast personal wealth and legions loyal only to him because you overpaid him, he might start thinking he should be in charge. So just enough to ensure loyalty, but not enough to enable rebellion.
All right, let's tick off those 5 laws. The ultimate rules for successful bad government.
Law number 1. Keep your winning coalition Q as small as possible. Fewer people to bribe means it's cheaper and easier to maintain loyalty. Focus your resources laser-like on the absolutely essential few.
Law number 2.
Keep the pool of potential replacements, the selectorate, as large as possible. Why? Because if the generals currently in your queue know there are dozens of other ambitious colonels waiting eagerly to take their jobs and perks, the incumbents will be much more loyal and less likely to make demands. Fear of replacement keeps Q in line.
Law 3.
Control the flow of revenue absolutely. Maintain a tight grip on the state's major income sources, and critically, use that control to keep the general population poor while making only your selected Q members fabulously wealthy through targeted distribution of state assets and privileges. Inequality isn't a bug, it's a feature.
Law 4.
Pay your Q exactly the minimum amount required to keep them loyal, not a penny more. Don't overspend on bribes. Generosity is risky, it can breed independence. Calculate the lowest price for loyalty and stick to it. Every dollar spent beyond that is wasted stability capital.
And the 5th law. This one sounds the most brutal.
It is. Never, ever take money away from your Q to improve the lives of the general population. If faced with a choice between funding schools or hospitals for the masses versus buying new Mercedes for your top generals or giving a lucrative contract to your brother-in-law, Q's interests win. Every single time. Sacrificing Q's benefits for the public good is political suicide for a dictator.
Can you give an example of this in action?
Mobutu Sese Seko, who ruled Zaire, now Congo, for 30 years, was a master of this. He basically institutionalized corruption, letting officials steal as long as they remained loyal and kicked back a portion. He constantly shuffled government jobs and military commands so no one could build an independent power base.
And foreign aid.
He treated international aid money as personal income, essentially using it as spoils to feed his Q. Meanwhile, the country's infrastructure crumbled and the population lived in abject poverty. But Mobutu stayed in power for decades.
So the conclusion here is just staggering. Bad governance, poverty, corruption, lack of public services isn't a sign of the dictator failing.
In many cases, no. It's the sign of them successfully implementing these cynical rules of power politics. That bad governance stabilizes their rule by keeping the population weak and dependent, and by ensuring that only those loyal to the dictator have access to wealth and power. It's a system designed for elite benefit and leader survival, not public welfare.
Okay, so they seem all-powerful, running this tight ship based on fear and bribes. But you said they're fragile. What are they actually afraid of? What keeps them awake at 3 a.m.?
Despite the iron fist, they live in constant fear. It's not usually international condemnation or strongly worded letters from the UN that worry them most.
But then?
They fear internal threats. They worry about things like economic collapse because that dries up the money needed to pay Q. They worry about international shifts that might empower rivals or cut off funds. They worry about the population becoming passively resistant, the leaks lying flat idea just refusing to cooperate. But above all,
betrayal from within.
Betrayal from Q. That's the nightmare scenario. And the data backs this up. What are the 5 core fears, the things most likely to actually topple a dictator?
Enemy.
Number one, by a huge margin responsible for something like 2/3 of dictator removals. Military coups or betrayal by security forces. Q turns on you. Number two, a succession crisis. The moment of vulnerability when the leader dies or seems weak, triggering an internal power struggle.
Number three,
mass uprisings, street revolutions, like the Arab Spring. Less common than coups, but still a major fear if things get out of hand. Number four, external intervention. A foreign power decides to invade or support rebels to overthrow the regime. And number five, economic collapse. Running out of money to bribe the people with guns.
So if that's what they fear, their daily checklists, their KPIs aren't about GDP growth or literacy rates.
Not at all. They're checking metrics related to those five fears. How much are we spending on the military? Is it enough? North Korea is estimated to spend maybe 25% of its GDP on its military. Are we building parallel security forces like Iran's Revolutionary Guard to watch the regular army?
What else is on that list?
Constant rotation of key personnel. Kim Jong-un reportedly replaces something like 40% of his top generals every couple of years. Why? To prevent anyone from building up too much personal loyalty or influence within the ranks, keep everyone slightly off balance.
Surveillance and control.
Absolutely. Maintaining a high police-to-population ratio, Cuba is often cited as having a very high number. Ensuring they have the internet kill switch, the ability to shut down communications during protests or elections, like Belarus did in 2020 for 61 hours. Total information control.
And the money.
Always the money. Nationalizing key resources like oil, think Chavez using Venezuela's PDVSA funds, or running clandestine operations like North Korea's rumored Office 39 to generate illicit funds specifically for the leadership and Q's loyalty payments.
So the questions running through the dictator's mind every morning are things like,
did any of my key generals meet with the U.S. ambassador yesterday without my knowledge? Are the oil revenues flowing smoothly this month? Is there any unusual troop movement near the capital? It's never, how are the people doing? It's always, is my power base secure for the next 24 hours?
Okay, we've covered the economics, the fear, the inner circle. Now let's talk about controlling the broader population, not just through force, but through messing with their heads, right? The information war.
Absolutely. It starts with establishing a near-total monopoly of narrative and information control. The goal here isn't just censorship, hiding inconvenient facts. The goal is much bigger. It's to control reality itself, as perceived by the citizens.
How do you control reality?
By controlling everything people see, hear, and read. State media, television, radio, newspapers, websites becomes a distorted mirror reflecting only the leader's greatness, the nation's triumphs, real or imagined, and the constant threats posed by enemies.
And what about other viewpoints? Independent journalists, social media.
They're systematically crushed or discredited. Any opposing voice isn't treated as legitimate dissent. It's immediately labeled fake news, foreign propaganda, traitorous lies, or the work of enemies of the state. This creates a simple, powerful narrative. Us, the loyal nation led by the genius leader, versus them, the evil forces trying to destroy us. It makes people distrust anything outside the official bubble.
It sounds like they try to control even the smallest things.
Oh, the control can be absurdly pervasive. Think about that humorous example. Maybe even censoring a negative weather forecast because a coming storm might imply the leader's powerful aura isn't stable enough to prevent it. It sounds funny, but it illustrates the desire for total control over every aspect of the perceived environment. Nothing can contradict the leader's perfection.
And technology has just put this on steroids, hasn't it? This whole digital Leninism idea.
Completely. It's taken authoritarian control to a level that 20th century dictators could only dream of. We're talking about digital surveillance on an unprecedented scale. Using artificial intelligence, advanced facial recognition linked to massive camera networks, China is often cited as having hundreds of millions of cameras. Big data analytics tracking online behavior, intense internet censorship, and firewalls. It creates this feeling of an omnipresent Big Brother society where the state potentially sees and knows everything.
And the goal is?
To make organizing any kind of resistance practically impossible. If you know your calls might be monitored, your online posts tracked, your face recognized at any protest, you're far less likely to take the risk. It induces preemptive obedience.
But it's not just the tech watching you, right? It's also psychological.
Yes, it's sophisticated psychological warfare. They don't just block information. They often flood the zone with disinformation, conspiracy theories, and contradictory narratives.
Why do that? Wouldn't this confuse people?
That's exactly the point. The goal is to generate so much noise and distrust that people give up trying to find the truth. They start to doubt all sources, including objective facts or independent reporting. This leads to apathy and social atomization.
Social atomization. What's that?
It's breaking down the bonds of trust between citizens. If you're constantly bombarded with propaganda saying your neighbors might be spies, or that online groups are foreign plots, or that you can't trust any media, you retreat into yourself. You become isolated.
And isolated people don't organize revolutions.
Exactly. Fear and distrust prevent people from connecting, sharing grievances, and forming the collective action needed to challenge the regime. Isolation becomes a powerful, self-enforcing tool of state control, achieved through psychological manipulation as much as physical surveillance.
Wow. Okay, another huge challenge for dictators seems to be what happens when they get old or die? The succession dilemma.
It's arguably the single biggest point of instability for most dictatorships. The moment the leader appears weak, sick, or uncertainty arises about who comes next, the whole system can become incredibly volatile. The wolves start circling.
Why is it such a paradox?
Because the ideal successor needs to be strong enough to command loyalty and maintain control after the current leader is gone. But they can't be so strong or ambitious that they pose a threat to the current leader while they're still alive.
So you need someone competent, but not too competent. Loyal, but not too ambitious.
It's an impossible needle to thread. This is why succession periods are often marked by purges, infighting within the elite, and heightened paranoia from the incumbent leader. They're constantly testing the loyalty of potential heirs.
What are the common strategies they use to try and manage this?
Well, one is the family dynasty model we mentioned, like in North Korea, Syria, Azerbaijan. You try to solve the loyalty and legitimacy problem by keeping power within the bloodline. It doesn't always work, but it's an attempt.
What else?
Another is institutionalizing weakness in potential successors. The vice president, the prime minister, these roles are often filled with people known to be pliable, maybe not very bright, or lacking their own independent power base. They're chosen specifically because they pose no threat to the leader. They're rubber stamps, not potential rivals.
Okay, and finally, dictators don't operate in a vacuum. They have an international playbook, right? They have to manage their image abroad and deal with other countries.
Absolutely. Especially in today's interconnected world, image management is huge. Many authoritarian regimes hire expensive Western public relations firms and lobbyists.
What for?
To whitewash their image, promote narratives of stability and economic progress, downplay human rights abuses, and gain access to international forums and finance. They try to present a respectable face to the world, even while crushing dissent at home. They also get very good at exploiting diplomatic loopholes in places like the UN to block investigations or water down resolutions criticizing them.
And they help each other out, don't they?
Yes. There's a growing phenomenon sometimes called the autocratic alliance. Dictators increasingly cooperate. They share surveillance technology, they learn suppression techniques from each other, they offer each other diplomatic cover, and they vote as a bloc in international organizations to protect their shared interests, which usually means blocking scrutiny of human rights or democratic standards.
Like a club.
A mutual support network for regimes that prioritize state control over individual liberty. And they are masters at exploiting democracy's weaknesses.
How so?
They take advantage of open Western markets to launder money or invest state funds. They use the free flow of capital to solidify their own financial power. They leverage the fact that democratic publics sometimes lose interest in foreign human rights issues, allowing abuses to continue unchecked. They skillfully use the tools and freedoms offered by democracies, free speech for their propaganda, open markets, legal systems to undermine democracy itself, and strengthen their own authoritarian grip back home. So given that true dictators lack genuine legitimacy from free elections, they have to work incredibly hard to manufacture a sense of rightfulness, a reason for people to obey beyond just raw fear. This relies on 4 key pillars of psychological and social control.
Okay, let's break down these pillars. What's the first one?
Pillar number 1, glorify the government and the leader. You have to establish some kind of artificial justification for why this specific regime should be in power.
How do they do that without, votes?
Through relentless propaganda. This involves the deification of the leader, portraying them not just as a politician, but as a historic visionary, a savior, almost a godlike figure who single-handedly rescued the nation or embodies its destiny. Think personality cults.
Like giant statues and portraits everywhere.
Exactly, and constantly promoting the regime's great achievements, whether real or exaggerated, building massive infrastructure projects, even if they're inefficient or unnecessary, boasting about national security, creating this narrative that only the current leader and system can provide stability and progress. The implicit message is, without us, there's only chaos.
Okay, so pillar 1 is building the myth. What's pillar 2?
Pillar 2, demand obedience. The goal here is to ensure compliance and prevent any kind of independent thought or collective action that might challenge the regime.
How is obedience demanded? Is it just threats?
Threats are part of it, but it's also more subtle. It often involves simplifying politics for the average citizen. The message is, governing is incredibly complex. Only the wise leader truly understands it. Your job as a good citizen isn't to question or participate, but simply to trust and obey. Be a loyal subject. It discourages critical thinking.
And it ties into that fear thing again, right?
Absolutely. A key technique is fostering the internalization of fear. This is when people become so aware of the potential consequences of stepping out of line, even if no secret police are watching them at that exact moment that they police themselves.
Self-censorship.
Precisely. People learn what topics are taboo, what opinions are dangerous to express even privately. They know the risks losing their job, trouble for their family, maybe worse. So they remain silent, not because they're actively being threatened at that second, but because the fear has become part of their internal calculation. That's incredibly effective for maintaining control without constant, overt violence.
Chilling. Okay, pillar 3.
Pillar 3. Erase dissent. Any voice that contradicts the official narrative or suggests an alternative way is an existential threat to a dictatorship. Dissent must be eliminated or neutralized.
How do they erase it?
Primarily through maintaining that information monopoly we talked about, building digital firewalls, censoring websites and social media, ensuring that the state-controlled media is the only easily accessible source of news, creating a single, tightly controlled information bubble for the entire population.
What about dissenters themselves, people who still manage to speak out?
They are targeted through stigmatization. They aren't portrayed as loyal citizens with different opinions. No, they are labeled as traitors, foreign agents, enemies of the people, saboteurs, or social destroyers. The goal is to morally isolate them, to make ordinary people afraid to associate with them, and to justify harsh repression against them. Once you're successfully branded an enemy, you lose all protection.
Okay, glorify, demand obedience, erase dissent. What's the 4th pillar?
Pillar 4. Fabricate enemies. This is a classic psychological manipulation technique used by regimes throughout history.
Why fabricate enemies?
To divert internal frustration and unify the population through shared hatred. If people are unhappy about the economy or corruption or lack of freedom, the regime needs to redirect that anger away from itself.
So they point the finger elsewhere.
Exactly. They constantly emphasize external threats, claiming foreign powers are plotting to destroy the nation, engaging in conspiracies, imposing unfair sanctions, trying to undermine the culture. It creates an us-against-the-world mentality.
And internal enemies, too.
Oh, yes. Targeting specific internal groups, maybe an ethnic minority, a religious group, political opponents, intellectuals, and branding them as scapegoats. They are the reason for our problems. They are cancers on the body politic. They are holding us back. This deflects blame from the leadership and channels popular discontent onto a vulnerable group, fostering internal unity through shared animosity. It's psychological redirection 101. Okay, we spent a lot of time mapping out how these systems work, how dictators gain and maintain control using fear, money, propaganda, technology. It can sound pretty bleak, almost foolproof.
Yeah, kind of depressing, honestly. Seems like they've got all the angles covered.
But it's crucial to end by circling back to their fundamental weakness. Despite the tanks, the spies, the absolute power on paper, dictators are operating from a position of deep inherent fragility.
And that core vulnerability is?
They are terrified of being seen through. Terrified of the moment when the population stops believing the myth, stops fearing the consequences, and realizes the leader is just a person, a flawed, often corrupt, mortal person holding onto power through lies and violence.
The emperor has no clothes moment.
Exactly. Once that illusion shatters, once people see the system for what it is, a mechanism for enriching a tiny elite at the expense of everyone else, the whole edifice becomes unstable. Their ultimate fear, the thing they spend all their resources fighting, is simply truth. Because, as the saying goes, truth does not follow orders.
So the system isn't unbreakable. History shows these regimes do fall.
Absolutely. They fall all the time. And often the cracks start appearing in predictable ways, usually when reality becomes impossible to ignore, despite the propaganda.
Like what kind of reality?
Severe economic hardship is a major one. You can tell people the economy is booming, but you can't propagandize an empty stomach or worthless currency. Gross social injustice that becomes too blatant to ignore. These are tangible truths that cut through the lies.
And what about the fear? How does that break down?
Fear is powerful, but it dissolves remarkably quickly when people realize, I am not alone. When isolated individuals, each suffering silently and practicing self-censorship, suddenly discover that millions of others feel the same way. That realization is explosive.
The power of connection.
It transforms the situation.
Yeah.
Collective action suddenly seems possible. The atmosphere shifts from fear to potential defiance. And that leads to the idea of the critical threshold.
What's that?
Research, particularly on nonviolent resistance movements, suggests that once active participation in protests reaches a certain level, the figure often cited is around 3.5% of the population being visibly mobilized, it becomes very difficult for the regime to maintain control.
Why 3.5%? Seems small.
It seems small, but it represents millions in a large country. And crucially, that level of sustained nonviolent protest creates a huge moral and practical dilemma for the security forces, for Q. The soldiers and police are ordered to crack down, maybe violently, on their own unarmed citizens. At that point, the calculation for Q members changes. The risks of sticking with the dictator might start to outweigh the benefits, especially if the dictator looks like they might fall. Loyalty evaporates.
So hope isn't just wishful thinking. It lies in people daring to question, daring to connect, daring to remember the truth when the state tries to enforce forgetting.
Exactly. The fight against dictatorship is always, ultimately, a battle between truth and lies, connection and isolation, memory and enforced amnesia.
Which brings us back to democracy. Why does it persist with all its flaws, its inefficiency, its constant bickering? You said it's not necessarily more moral.
But it is arguably a smarter institutional design for long-term stability and public good.
Why smarter?
Because it forces leaders to rely on that vast winning coalition we talked about. Millions of voters, diverse media outlets, independent courts, active opposition parties, civil society groups. Q is enormous.
And you can't bribe millions of people with private jets.
Precisely. An enormous Q cannot be bought off with private goods. To win and retain power in a functioning democracy, leaders must provide public goods, things that benefit large swaths of the population, like decent schools, healthcare, infrastructure, economic opportunities, security under the rule of law.
So good policies become good politics.
In a democracy, yes. Providing public goods becomes essential for the leader's political survival. They have to deliver for the many, not just the few, if they want to stay in office.
So the real strength of democracy isn't that it magically produces virtuous leaders.
No. It's that the system, when working properly, forces even self-interested or potentially bad leaders to do generally good things for the public in order to gain and keep power. That's the genius of the design. It channels ambition towards public benefit, or at least tries to.
Okay, that's a powerful thought to end on. So let's bring it back to the listener. Your homework check, that final provocative thought.
Right. So the next time you hear someone, maybe online, maybe in conversation, casually throw around the word dictator to describe a leader, pause for a second. Cut through the rhetoric and ask yourself these 3 specific objective questions based on what we've discussed. Question 1. Could this leader be peacefully removed from power in the next scheduled, reasonably fair election if a majority of voters decided they wanted someone else? Is that mechanism functional?
Question 2.
Can the political opposition legally exist, organize, campaign, and openly criticize the leader on major national media platforms without facing imminent arrest, bankruptcy, or violence? Is genuine dissent tolerated?
And question 3.
Does the country's highest court, the Supreme Court or its equivalent, sometimes dare to rule against the actions or wishes of the executive leader? And crucially, are those rulings actually respected and implemented by the government? Is there any independent check on executive power?
Because the answers to those questions really draw the line, don't they? Between a leader who might be tough, maybe even authoritarian-leaning, but still operates within some institutional boundaries.
And a leader who has systematically dismantled or captured all those institutions for the sole purpose of maintaining personal, unchecked power indefinitely. That's the crucial distinction the dictator label should be reserved for.
We really hope this framework helps you navigate these often heated political discussions with a bit more clarity and critical thinking.
Absolutely. Our goal here wasn't to point fingers at any specific country or leader, but simply to provide the analytical tools based on political science, so you can make your own informed assessments. Objectivity is key.
Totally agree. Think critically, everyone. And hey, if you found this conversation useful, or even just interesting to sip your coffee to, please do subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
And also, check out our good friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. Mickey's got some really fun travel vlogs and, honestly, some pretty hilarious memes, too. Definitely worth a look.
For sure. Give Mickey some love. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in.
We'll catch you next time on Sip and Talk.